A common question that I hear either in the office or just when I'm out about talking to people is, do we really need supplements, period? And a piggyback question on there is, do we really need supplements if we don't have symptoms? And the answer to both of those questions is yes. And I'm going to explain to you the reason why the answer is yes today, and I'll show you research that supports that. And the very simple explanation, if you need a 30-second or less answer, is that feeling isn't function. And just because you feel good doesn't mean you're functioning optimally. And again, this teaching session will help you understand why that's true. And so what I've drawn for you here is a timeline of health in terms of vitamin and mineral content in our body. And so there are 30 essential vitamins and minerals that are required for the enzymes in our body to do the work that they need to do for us to live and be healthy. Remember that enzymes are proteins that do work, and all enzymes have nutrient cofactors that they require for them to do the work that they do. So, for example, the enzyme GAD65, I've made a video on this before. The enzyme GAD65 is the enzyme that converts the amino acid glutamate to GABA. Glutamate is our gas pedal in our brain. It's our excitatory neurotransmitter. Um, it helps us go. GABA is the brake pedal. It helps us motor down, go to sleep, not be anxious, etc. Well, to get GABA, we need GAD65 to turn glutamate into GABA. Well, GAD65 is the protein or the enzyme that does that, but it can't do that without vitamin B6, magnesium, and iron, all three of which are key vitamins or minerals. And B6 happens to be the rate limiting step of that enzyme, or the most important step. So if you are insufficient in any of those three, this enzyme, this process may not go forward as efficiently as it could. And so you have a backup of, or an increase in glutamate, not as much GABA produced. So you may be more anxious, more excitatory, less able to motor down and go to sleep. Okay. So there's an example of an enzyme that requires nutrient cofactors to work. And there's three of the 30 crucial vitamins and minerals required for our bodies to function needed for this one enzyme. Magnesium, for example, is needed for 300 different enzyme reactions in the body. Vitamin B6 is needed for over 150 different enzyme reactions in the body. Iron's needed for a ton. I don't know the actual number of iron, but you get the point. So this is why we have to eat so we can get these nutrients from our foods. But with the recent, relatively recent in human history, introduction of things like herbicides and pesticides and glyphosate and, industrial agriculture and industrial animal husbandry, we've had a giant decrease in the health of our soils and in the nutrient status of our soils, so that what is grown in the soils has lower amounts of these vitamins and minerals in them. And I'm sure if you frequent health blogs, you've read somewhere along the line that an organic apple today, to match the nutrients in an organic apple 40 years ago, you'd have to eat like 20 plus organic apples today. So we've had a massive decrease in the nutrition level of our food supply, which if if we're eating organic and whole food and you've still had that massive of a decrease in the nutritional value in that food, supplementation must happen, or else we won't have any shot at getting optimal levels of nutrients. Another thing, the FDA puts out recommended daily allowances for foods. Okay. Or there's another one here called the EAR, stands for estimated average requirement. Okay. And the estimated average requirement, according to the research, the way they figure the EAR is it's the intake level for a nutrient at which the needs of half of the healthy population is adequate and half is inadequate. Right? That should make your head hurt. It's like, really? So the EAR, the estimated average recommendation, is basically the level of a certain nutrient to take, so half people are deficient and half aren't. Well, that's not going to make anyone healthy. Okay. And the recommended daily allowances are based on the level of a nutrient to take so that you don't have symptoms. So, for example, to set the recommended daily allowance of vitamin C, studies were done to give people colds and then give them vitamin C and see how much vitamin C it took for people with colds to not have symptoms or have a reduction in symptoms. Not to be healthy, but just to have a reduction in symptoms. So again, the whole goal in nutritional research oftentimes is insufficient. It's like they're not even studying healthy people or how much vitamin C does it take to be healthy. It's how much vitamin C does it take to reduce symptoms. Well, that's silly. When I'm sick, I don't want my symptoms reduced. I want them gone. I want to be healed, right? And so when we're trying to be healthy, we need objective markers to show us health, and that's where testing comes in, because just because I have no symptoms doesn't mean I'm healthy. I don't want to just feel well, I want to function well too, and the function is shown by testing. So our whole society is built on symptom suppression. Our healthcare system is built on symptom suppression and a false understanding of feeling is function, which isn't true. And nutritional research is built on recommended daily allowances or estimated average requirements, which by definition are not studying healthy people. Okay, so when you're reading research and you're reading a paper that says we studied healthy people, well, the quote unquote healthy people they studied were the average asymptomatic American. Well, the average American is overweight or obese, so that person isn't healthy to begin with. Okay, and then if they're doing a paper where the standard was the EAR or the estimated average requirement, well, again, the EAR actually represents apparently healthy people. Okay, they don't have symptoms, and we've given them enough uh, nutrition to be barely adequate, essentially. Well, again, that's not health. That's not your goal. I'm sure your goal is optimal. Your goal is health and longevity, not just a lack of symptoms. So if we don't get enough nutrition, say you started life optimal, okay? If you don't get enough nutrients from the soils and from the plants that grow from the soils and from the animals that eat those plants that grow from the soils, then over time you're going to use nutrients that you had stored up in your body. And if you continue to follow quote unquote nutrition guidelines, you're going to continue to deplete your resources because you're not supplementing because that's just an industry. They're just trying to get money off you. You don't need to supplement, right? But then as you go longer without providing optimal nutrition, eventually you will become symptomatic because eventually you'll hit an insufficient level of one or more nutrients. And if you still don't replace those, ultimately you become deficient and you get diagnosed with some disease. So, for example, if you had vitamin C deficiency, that's scurvy, right? If you have a vitamin B1 deficiency, that's beriberi. So neuropathy and things like that. If you have a vitamin D deficiency, that could be all kinds of things from autoimmune disease to osteoporosis to cancer to cardiovascular disease, right? So the disease diagnosis is the end stage. You've been deficient for a long time, and we don't want to wait that long. Okay. And so, why does this happen? Why do we need optimal nutrients and not just the estimated average requirement? Because again, the estimated average requirement is insufficient. And if you don't have enough nutrients, right? Like I talked about with that GAD65 enzyme. GAD65 requires B6, magnesium, iron, right? So now let's say you have insufficient levels of all three of those. just to make it easy. Okay. So if you have insufficient levels of B6, magnesium, and iron, and we said magnesium is needed for 300 different enzyme reactions in the body. B6 is needed for over 150 enzymes in the body. Iron is needed for many. Okay. So if you don't have enough for all that they're required for, how does the body decide which enzymes are going to get them and which aren't? It's called triage theory. Okay. And the definition of triage is to basically prioritize what's in front of you and give the B6 to the highest priority things and not to the lowest priority enzymes, so to speak. So when you're running low on things, you have to ration. So you can think of triage as rationing your nutrients, and the body's going to bias the nutrients towards those enzymes that focus on survival mechanisms to keep you alive at the expense of longevity mechanisms. Okay. And so another way to say this is the body is going to prioritize short-term living for long-term success. That's the triage theory. And there's examples of this in physiology. In one disease we've discussed in the past called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, when these patients are when they have this disease is basically a triage disease. These patients are so inflamed and metabolically dysfunctional, the cell goes into what's called molecular hypometabolism. And so the cell says, hey, I'm going to decrease my cellular functions and essentially go into hibernation so that I can live rather than burn out. Another example that you're more familiar with is cancer. Cancer is a triage disease. Cancer is a cell, which then becomes groups of cells, making the decision to live today at the expense of tomorrow. And that should be a light bulb or a mind blown moment for you. Why? Well, because in all three of these situations, if we're talking about triage and survival, it's all saying the same thing. Whether you call it triage, whether it's molecular hypometabolism and SIRS, or whether it's cancer, the cell, and remember, you're just trillions of cells. So just like you as an individual, you don't want to die today, the cell, an individual cell, also doesn't want to die today. So rather than die today, that cancer cell will make the adaptations it needs to make to stay alive today. And if that results in cancer down the road, well, too bad, because that's the organism's problem. The cell made the adaptation today to stay alive and buy you time long enough to hopefully make smarter choices and move you away from the choices in the environment that are driving the cell to be unhealthy. So, for example, if someone's a smoker, that smoke goes into the lungs and is very toxic. It's carcinogenic to the lungs. So if you smoke over the long term, eventually the lung cells are like, hey, we could die from these toxins that this person's inhaling, or we can adapt our metabolism to a pro-cancer metabolism so that we can keep living. And even though this will kill the person over the long term, the choices we're making today is keeping them alive longer and buying them time to hopefully quit smoking before they die, right? They're buying us time to make better choices in the short term. And so same idea in chronic inflammatory response syndrome. The cell is going into hibernation so that it doesn't die or flame out, hoping that the human that the cell is a part of will make better decisions and change its environment. And in the case of that disease, remove itself from exposure to environmental biotoxins. And in the case of today's conversation, triage theory, the body is going to prioritize the nutrients that we have low levels of toward the survival-based enzymes to keep the person alive long enough to hopefully find a source a very robust source of the vitamins that they're lacking, so that not only can they survive, but hopefully replenish their levels and have enough around to supply every enzyme in the body, and then go above and beyond just surviving and just living, but then moving towards optimization and longevity. And so if our goal is health and longevity, we cannot reach that without supplementation and eating a healthy diet and doing, performing all the lifestyle strategies that we talk about every week. And so let me show you the research that's been done by many people, but Dr. Bruce Ames wrote a wonderful paper consolidating the information about triage theory and these key nutrients. So let's go to that now. So here we are looking at the paper by Dr. Ames, Prolonging Healthy Aging, Longevity, Vitamins, and Proteins. This is from 2018 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And so he says here, triage theory states a modest deficiency of one of the nutrients or cofactors triggers a built-in rationing system that favors proteins needed for immediate survival and reproduction while sacrificing those needed to protect against future damage. Okay, so notice what he says, a modest deficiency. So that's not an outright deficiency. So if we go back to our picture here, Dr. Ames is talking about a modest deficiency. That would put us somewhere between the EAR and insufficiency here. So we're not even talking about an obvious deficiency here where we've got scurvy or beriberi, right? Those are way easy to see, and those are extreme deficiency, which in our society no longer happens often because we have fortified foods with certain nutrients that we know we need. But fortification is not optimization. So a modest deficiency, you're walking around without symptoms and you're eating fortified wheat or cereal with iron that they've added to it or whatever. And you're like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting my recommended daily allowance, which we talk about as woefully inadequate. Well, walking around, even though you don't have symptoms today, walking around with that modest deficiency over years, you know, keeps you triaging for years. So you're in survival mode and you've got insidious decay happening. You're aging too fast. You're slowing down and you don't notice it now or in 10 years, but maybe over 20, 30 years, you do, and you develop a chronic disease of aging like cardiovascular disease or cancer or arthritis or something. So let's go back to the paper. So Dr. Ames proposes an optimal level of many of the known 30 vitamins and essential minerals elements is necessary for promoting healthy aging. So optimal level, not just an EAR, which is again defined as the level of a nutrient at which the needs of half the healthy population is adequate and half is inadequate. Okay. So by definition, if you're eating the estimated average requirement, at best, that can only make half the population adequate, which again is not optimal. So the triage theory has previously introduced the concept that proteins or enzymes are sacrificed during a vitamin or mineral shortage to favor survival. What are those 30 vitamins and minerals? Vitamins A, B1, B2, B6, B12, biotin, vitamin C, choline, vitamin D, vitamin E, folate, vitamin K, niacin, pantothenate, calcium, chloride, chromium, cobalt, copper, iodine, iron, manganese, magnesium, molybdenum, phosphorus, potassium, selenium, sodium, sulfur, and zinc. Also DHA and EPA, which are omega-3 fatty acids, and then 9 essential amino acids needed for proteins and hormones. Most of the world's population, even in developed countries, consume many of the vitamins and minerals at levels below those recommended. And again, we said the recommendations are already too low. So if you're eating less than they're recommending, that's awful. And based on the estimated average requirements in the United States, the population on average, 70% don't have enough vitamin D, 60% don't have enough vitamin E, almost half don't have enough magnesium, 40% almost don't have enough calcium, and on and on. So again, if we're not getting enough nutrients, we can't be optimally healthy. And even though we might not feel suboptimal, sick, or diseased today, if we're not replacing what we're not getting from our poor soils and our poor diets, even if we're eating great diets, then we're lacking. And over time, that adds up because our body's triaging and promoting survival versus thriving. So that's the main point of this paper. It's a great paper where he dives into the multiple nutrients and shows you why each one is important. So, for example, magnesium. Magnesium deficiency affects 45% of the United States population and is associated with increased death from all causes, poor DNA repair, which would promote cancer, increased risk of lung cancer and other cancers, heart disease, telomere shortening, so sped up aging, risk of stroke. That's very important to understand. And if we go to the end here, we can see mechanistic, genetic, and epidemiologic evidence suggests that the metabolic trade-off occurring upon a vitamin and mineral shortage results in an accumulation of insidious damage and aging-associated diseases. Again, that trade-off is your body's selecting, John wants to survive today, future be damned, because current self is all that matters, right? Future self might not like me, but current self is the only one that matters right now. So they're making choices to help me hopefully get to future self, but not guarantee that future self will feel good or enjoy his life. Okay. So you may be alive in the future, but you might not be optimal and thriving. By optimizing survival and longevity, vitamin mineral intake throughout life, premature, insidious, and increased risk of degenerative diseases may be preventable. Okay, so again, if we can optimize our vitamin and mineral intake, again, in 2024, that requires supplementation due to our soils and industrial agriculture and animal husbandry, etc. If we can do that, then in large part, the degenerative diseases, the chronic diseases that ravage Western society are preventable. And again, he talks about here, it should be noted that the official definition of estimated average requirement does not take into consideration that the quote unquote healthy population sampled by studies may be only apparently healthy because evidence is provided here that it is actually aging faster due to long-term triage effects. Therefore, official EAR values might actually have been set too low because they did not take long-term triage effects into account. So the apparently healthy people, he's saying, aren't symptomatic yet, but they're somewhere along the spectrum towards that because they've been triaging their deficiencies for some amount of time before they entered the study, right? So to truly study healthy people, we'd have to test the people's levels of nutrients before they were entered into the study. So we could say, yes, these people actually do have healthy levels of all this. These are the optimal healthy people that we want to be the standard and that we compare everyone else to. Healthy foods are nutrient dense, containing high levels of vitamins, minerals, fibers, longevity vitamins relative to calories. So that would be what we've talked about many times: nuts, seeds, eggs, seafood, vegetables, fruits. And so again, we want to eat as healthy as we can and then supplement to make up for whatever the diet is not giving us. This is cool too, because a lot of things are blamed on genetics in our society, right? So an important concept relative to the use of vitamins for health is the fact that over 50 human genetic diseases can be ameliorated by the administration of high doses of vitamins, of supplements, excuse me. Supplementation raises the concentration of the needed coenzyme to levels that overcome a defect in the enzyme binding site, which is likely to be deformed by mutation or age-related membrane rigidity. So basically what that's saying is when you supplement with the vitamins that the enzymes need, when you raise the level to basically supersaturate that dysfunctional binding site, the enzyme can move forward and the biology can occur. That means you move closer to longevity and health. Lastly, there is a need for the development of tests providing a range of vitamins and mineral levels required to keep enzymes and proteins optimally functional. So again, rather than studying what is just enough to give this person so their symptoms improve a little, we should be studying what is the level we need to have optimal health. The prevention of the degenerative diseases of aging is a different science than curing diseases. Prevention involves expertise in metabolism, nutrition, biochemistry, and genetic regulatory elements of polymorphisms. In what general practitioner's office in America are they an expert in one of those, let alone all of those? None, because they're not interested in preventing disease. They say they're interested in cure, but they're not even interested in that. So if you are looking to stay out of the hospitals and the doctor's office and to prevent a disease from ever developing so you don't have to hope to cure it, then one major step is making sure you're getting enough of the 30 required vitamins and minerals that your physiology requires to be healthy and optimal. And know that just because you feel good doesn't mean you're functioning well, and doesn't mean that you're not already rationing or triaging your supply. And so again, the way to know for yourself is to test. You can test vitamin and mineral levels and other important biomarkers to understand where is your physiology and what do you need to do specifically for you from a nutritional standpoint, from a supplement standpoint, from an other lifestyle factor standpoint, such as stress and sleep and toxic exposure, etc., to optimize your chance towards a long, healthy life and to get you out of survival mode and into longevity and thrive mode.